The day Conley and Remy sold their house, people thought they'd lost their minds. I remember standing there with the others, watching them load the last of their things into that old truck. Their eyes were calm, steady, like they had nothing to lose, and maybe they didn't. It was all going to God, they said. Conley and Remy were the last people anyone expected to make a decision like that. Connor had a steady job at the bank, the kind where he wore crisp shirts and people respected him. Remy ran a fabric shop, always laughing, always busy. They had a good life, a life most of us could only hope for. But then one Sunday morning, out of nowhere, Connor stood up in church and told everyone that he and Remy were going into ministry. Full time. It was like something out of a movie. Connor spoke with a fire in his voice that silenced the room. God has called us, he said. We are giving everything we have to follow him. People murmured. Some laughed. But Connor wasn't laughing. He had that same calm look, the one that didn't waver even when people shook their heads and walked away. At first, nobody took it seriously. Maybe it was just a phase, we thought. But then they sold the house, closed the shop, and gave away most of their belongings. They moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, one that most people would barely consider livable. The paint was peeling, the windows creaked, and it was hot all the time. But Conley and Remy didn't complain once. When I visited them, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Their once neat living room was full of old chairs, a warm couch, and a table stacked with Bibles. People were already coming there, looking for something they couldn't seem to find anywhere else. It was strange, seeing Conley in that row. He was no longer the bank man in crisp shirts, but a man who sat with his hands open, listening to people's pain and praying with them. Conley, are you sure about this? I asked him one night. He just smiled and said, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Soon, word spread. People who once ignored them started showing up. Some just sat quietly, others poured out their hearts. There were mothers worried about their kids, men struggling with drinking, families on the brink of breaking apart. And Conley would sit there, calm, listening, praying. One night, I stayed to see one of their prayer gatherings. It was just a small group of us, maybe 10 or 12 people in that tiny room, but the air felt heavy, thick with something I can't quite explain. There was no flashy preaching, no shouting. Conley just spoke to people, quietly, almost like he was talking to each of them alone. I don't know what they gave up or what they found, but the Conley and Remy I knew were gone. They'd left behind comfort, a secure future, everything. But somehow, they had something that none of us could touch.